Today I'm telling you a story so inevitable, it feels like fate itself loaded the gun. A tale of one man's return that turned a dying town's fear into something sharper, something dangerous, deep in the Nevada Badlands of 1878, where heat waves dance like ghosts over cracked earth and every horizon promises either salvation or a grave. Blackstone simmered under the thumb of a man who owned the silver, the law, and the silence. A place where good men were dragged to death and the survivors learned to look away. It began with the slow clip-clop of hooves on Main Street. A lone rider in black duster, hat low, eyes hidden. He ordered whiskey, paid with a single silver coin, and spoke 5 words that changed everything. Sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. But in Blackstone, the dogs had teeth, and the stranger they'd left for dead in a canyon 5 years earlier had come back, not for forgiveness, but for what was owed. If this already has your pulse racing, hit like and comment below. Where are you right now as this tale unfolds? The sun hung low over the Nevada desert like a bruised eye, bleeding orange across the sagebrush flats. Blackstone lay ahead, a ragged line of weathered board buildings hunkered against the wind. Caleb Harlan felt the heat rising off the sand in slow, lazy waves that made the town shimmer like a mirage he half wished would disappear. He rode an easy, steel-gray stallion, picking its way over the ruts without hurry. The black duster coat he wore caught the last of the light, turning him into a long shadow sliding down Main Street. No one spoke. No one moved much. A woman sweeping the porch of the general store paused mid-stroke, broom frozen. 2 miners leaning against a post exchanged a glance and looked away fast. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, the kind that settles when people have learned it's safer to watch or than to greet. Caleb kept his eyes under the brim of his hat. He noted the crooked saloon sign above the Golden Spur. Wood splintered at one corner, nail heads rusted brown, as though someone had taken a boot to it months ago and no one had bothered to fix it since. Small things like that told stories louder than words. He swung down in front of the hitching rail, boots striking packed dirt with a soft thud. The stallion snorted once, low and patient. Caleb looped the reins, gave the animal's neck a brief pat, then pushed through the swinging doors. Inside, the air was stale with tobacco smoke, spilled whiskey, and the faint metallic tang of sweat-soaked leather. Afternoon light slanted through dusty windows in long slanted bars. Conversation died the moment his shadow crossed the threshold. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. A piano player in the corner let the last chord hang unfinished. Caleb walked to the bar without haste. Hank Rollins, broad across the shoulders and going gray at the temples, wiped the same spot on the counter 3 times before he looked up. "Whiskey," Caleb said. Voice quiet. Flat. No challenge in it. Hank set a bottle down hard enough that dust puffed off the label. The glass he slid over was filmed with grit. No apology offered. None expected. Caleb poured. The amber liquid caught the light for a second, then disappeared down his throat in one measured swallow. He felt the burn settle low in his chest, familiar as an old scar. Behind him, spurs chimed. 3 sets, deliberate. The Caldwell brothers pushed through the doors like they owned the air itself. Cade first, tall, lean, eyes too close together and temper always one wrong word from boiling over. Luke next, wiry, quick to laugh the ugly kind. Harlan last, built like a barn door, slow until he wasn't. They fanned out without a word spoken. Cade stopped at 2 paces to Caleb's right. Luke leaned against a post to the left. Harlan blocked the path to the back door. A loose triangle, old as the hills and just as predictable. "Ain't seen your face before," Cade said, voice carrying across the sudden hush. "You lost, stranger?" Caleb poured another finger. Didn't turn. Just passing through. Luke barked a laugh, sharp and mean. Nobody just passes through Blackstone, not since the strike. You got a name? Caleb set the glass down. The clink sounded louder than it should have. Don't need one. Harlan shifted his weight. Floorboards creaked. Maybe you ain't heard. Drifters ain't welcome. Bad for business. Caleb finally turned. Slow, eyes pale under the hat brim, scanning each face in turn. He reached into the duster, slow enough that no one drew. Produced a single silver dollar. Placed it on the bar with deliberate care. For the drink, he said. Then, softer, almost gentle. Advice: sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. The saloon went so quiet, you could hear the wind rattling loose boards outside. A bead of sweat rolled down the neck of the bottle and hit the wood with a tiny, wet tick. Cade's hand hovered near his holster. Trigger finger twitched once. Sleeping dogs, huh? Funny thing about dogs in Blackstone, they bite. Caleb met his gaze, held it. 3 against 1 hardly seems fair. Cade's mouth twisted. This ain't about fair. He took a half step forward, close enough that Caleb could smell the cheap rot gut on his breath. Caleb didn't flinch, didn't blink, just stood there, still as stone, the way a rattler waits before it strikes. The moment stretched, thin, brittle. Then Cade spat on the floor, close enough to Caleb's boot that a few drops spattered leather. Last chance to ride out, friend. Hate to see a man die over a misunderstanding. Caleb considered the spit, considered the 3 men, considered the eyes watching from every shadowed corner of the room. He could walk away, could mount up, disappear into the heat waves, wait for another day, another angle. But the weight of 5 years pressed against his ribs. The scar along his temple itched, a thin white line that still remembered the burn of black powder and the sound of a bullet glancing off bone. He picked up the glass, drained it in one smooth motion, set it down. Fair enough, he said. Cade's hand dropped to his Colt. Before the draw cleared leather, Caleb's elbow snapped back, fast, precise, catching Cade square in the throat. The eldest Caldwells staggered, choking, eyes wide with shock. Luke yanked iron. The shot cracked wild, splintering wood above the bar. Caleb's boot slammed into Luke's wrist. The revolver spun across the floor, skittering under a table. Harlan lunged, massive fist swinging. Caleb ducked, used the big man's momentum, twisted, and sent him crashing shoulder first into the bar rail. Bottles shattered. Whiskey pooled dark on the boards. Cade, gasping, clawed for his gun again. Caleb moved, a blur of black coat and steady hands. In less than a heartbeat, Cade's own Colt was pressed cold against his temple. Like I said, Caleb murmured. Hardly seems fair. He kicked Cade's legs out. The man went down hard, sprawling in spilled liquor and broken glass. The saloon held its breath. Caleb stepped back, keeping the barrel trained. Here's what's going to happen. You 3 are going to walk out that door. You're going to forget you ever saw me. And most important, you're going to stop bleeding this town dry. Cade's face was red, rage and humiliation twisting it. Blood trickled from his lip. You don't know what you started, stranger. This ain't over. Caleb thumbed the hammer back. The metallic click rolled through the room like distant thunder. It is for today. He backed toward the door, gun steady. The brothers gathered themselves, Cade limping, Luke cradling his wrist, Harlan dazed. They stumbled out into the dying light. Caleb laid Cade's Colt on the bar, slid another silver dollar toward Hank, adjusted his hat. Sorry about the mess, he said quietly. Hank stared at him, shotgun half raised, barrel wavering between the stranger and the empty doorway. Caleb pushed through the swinging doors. The sun was almost gone now, sky bleeding red. He paused on the porch, feeling the eyes still on him. Behind him, in the shadowed alley beside the livery, Caldwell leaned against the wall, spitting blood. Luke and Harlan flanked him. That son of a bitch moved like lightning, Luke muttered. Cade wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, eyes narrow. He ain't no drifter, not with hands like that. Harlan grunted. We tell Kane? Cade straightened slowly. A thin, ugly smile touched his split lip. Oh, we tell Kane. And when we do, that ghost is gonna wish he'd kept riding. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and gun oil down the empty street. Caleb stood a moment longer, listening to the fading jingle of spurs. Then he walked toward the boarding stairs, shoulders square. But the old scar on his temple burned like it remembered everything. Somewhere up on the hill, in a big house with lamplight already glowing, a man with a silver-handled cane would soon hear a name, or the lack of one, and the quiet years would end. The night came down hard on Blackstone, the kind of dark that swallowed lamplight and left only the faint glow of stars through a thin haze of dust. Caleb Harlan climbed the narrow stairs behind the golden spur, each step creaking under his weight like an old warning. The hallway smelled of linseed oil and yesterday's tobacco, and the single wall sconce flickered, throwing long shadows that danced ahead of him. He pushed open the door to his rented room, small, low-ceilinged, one window looking down on the back alley. The bed was narrow, the washstand chipped. A single candle burned on the scarred table, its flame steady but small. Caleb closed the door softly, turned the key, then stood a moment listening to the muffled voices rising from the saloon below. He shrugged off the black duster, hung it on the peg. The scar along his temple pulled tight when he moved his head. A thin white line that still itched when the air turned cold or when memory came too close. He sat on the edge of the bed, drew the Colt from the cross-draw holster, and began the slow, practiced ritual of cleaning it. The cloth moved in careful circles over the barrel. Metal gleamed dully in the candlelight. Every few strokes he paused, listening. Footsteps in the alley below, a low mutter of voices. Not loud enough to make out words, but enough to tighten the muscles in his shoulders. He remembered the last time he'd sat in a room like this. 5 years ago, the night before that everything broke. Eli Whitaker had handed him a tin cup of coffee, black and bitter, and said, "You don't have to stay, Michael. This fight's mine." Caleb had stayed anyway, and when the bullets came, Eli went down first, dragged behind horses until there was nothing left to recognize. Caleb had taken one to the head, glancing, not clean, and woken up in a dry wash with a taste of blood and sage in his mouth. He'd crawled away, survived, disappeared, trained, waited. Now he was back, and the waiting felt different, sharper, like standing on the edge of a canyon and knowing the ground was already crumbling. Below, the saloon had quieted some. A chair scraped. A voice, rough, familiar, rose through the floorboards. Remember how they found him? Pieces. Just pieces. They were Jeb Stubb Malone. The dwarf prospector had a voice that carried when he wanted it to. Caleb set the Colt down, leaned closer to the floor, ear near the boards. Stubb went on, slower now. Eli Whitaker was a good man. Tried to stop the protection money, tried to keep the claims honest. Kane and the Caldwells didn't like that, so they dragged him, smiled while they did it. A pause. Glasses clinked. Someone cleared a throat. Clara Rollins spoke then, soft but steady. I saw it from the kitchen window. The dust cloud, the ropes, the way they laughed after. I still hear it sometimes, when the wind's right. Caleb closed his eyes. The scar burned. He could picture her face, younger then, softer, standing at that window while the man who'd once brought her family firewood and helped fix the porch roof was torn apart in the street below. He'd been there too, hidden in the rocks above the canyon, too late, too young, too afraid to move until the horses were gone and the laughter faded. He opened his eyes. The candle had burned lower. Wax pooled on the table like spilled blood. Outside, in the alley behind the livery stable, 3 shadows gathered under the overhang. Cade Caldwell leaned against the wall, still favoring his throat where the elbow had landed. Luke nursed his swollen wrist. Harlan stood watch, arms crossed, eyes scanning the dark. Cade spat into the dirt. He moved like he knew every damn move we'd make. Luke snorted. Fast, too fast, and that calm ain't natural. Harlan grunted. We tell Kane? Cade straightened. We tell Kane, but we tell him careful. Man like that, he ain't just passing through. He's here for something. They moved off together, boots scuffing gravel, heading toward the big house on the hill where lamplight burned late. Up in the mansion, Thaddeus Kane sat behind a wide oak desk, silver-handled cane resting across his knees. The room smelled of cigar smoke and polished leather. A fire crackled low in the grate. Cade stood hat in hand. Stranger in town today. Black coat, pale eyes. Took us apart in the spur like we was greenhorns. Kane's fingers tightened on the cane. Knuckles whitened. Describe him. Cade did. The way the man moved, the quiet voice, the notched colt, the single silver dollar left behind like a warning. Kane listened without expression. When Cade finished, the older man leaned back. A long silence stretched. Deputy Chase? Kane said at last. The name came out flat like he was tasting something bitter. Thought we buried him in that canyon. Bullet to the head. Should have been clean. Cade shifted. He ain't dead. Kane's eyes narrowed. No, he's not. He tapped the cane once against the floor. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. Find out for certain where he's been, what he wants, and if it's what I think. Kane's mouth curved, not quite a smile. Then we make sure this time the grave stays filled. Cade nodded. The brothers left. Kane sat alone a moment longer, staring into the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes like distant gunshots. Upstairs in the small room, Caleb finished reassembling the Colt. He slid it back into the holster. Slow, deliberate. The scar on his temple throbbed now, steady as a heartbeat. He crossed to the window, parted the thin curtain an inch. Below, the alley was empty, but he felt it. The weight of eyes that had found him again. Not just the Caldwells. Something bigger. Something that remembered a young deputy's face and the sound of a shot that hadn't quite killed. He let the curtain fall. The candle guttered. Shadows lengthened across the walls. Caleb sat on the bed, back straight, hands resting on his knees. He didn't move for a long time. Somewhere in the dark, a horse snorted once, low and uneasy. And on the hill, a single lamp stayed burning long after the rest of Blackstone had gone quiet. The morning sun cut sharp across Blackstone, turning the dust motes in the air to tiny sparks. Town Hall stood at the end of Main Street, a squat, whitewashed building with a sagging porch and a flagpole that hadn't seen a breeze strong enough to lift the colors in weeks. Inside, the air was already close, smelling of old paper, pipe tobacco, and the faint sourness of men who'd spent too many mornings arguing over claims and coin. Mayor Elias Hawthorne sat at the head of the long oak table, collar tight, face flushed from the heat and the weight of decisions he'd rather not make. Around him, the council members shifted in their chairs. Older men mostly, merchants and mine foremen with calloused hands and careful eyes. Councilman Nathan Brooks, youngest of them, sat near the window, fingers drumming a slow, nervous rhythm on the armrest. He hadn't slept well. None of them had, not since word of yesterday's saloon trouble spread like dry grass fire. The double doors opened without a knock. Caleb Harlan stepped inside. Black duster still on, hat low, boots leaving faint prints in the sawdust floor. He carried no weapon visible, but the room felt it anyway. The quiet certainty of a man who knew exactly where every exit was. Hawthorne straightened. "This is a closed meeting, stranger. State your business or leave." Caleb didn't answer right away. He walked to the table, slow enough that every eye followed. Then he reached into the duster, slow, deliberate, and dropped a tarnished U.S. Marshal's badge onto the wood with a soft, metallic clunk. The sound landed like a stone in still water. Nathan Brooks went pale. His fingers stopped drumming. Hawthorne stared at the badge, mouth working silently for a second. You can't just..." "I'm assuming control of law enforcement in Blackstone," Caleb said, voice low even, carrying no threat but no room for argument either. "Effective now." A ripple moved through the room, chairs creaking, breaths held. One councilman half rose, then sat again. Caleb met their eyes one by one. "Protection fees collected by the Caldwell brothers end today. Kane's private security is disbanded. And you're going to tell me everything you know about the murder of Sheriff Eli Whitaker." The name hit like a slap. Hawthorne flinched. Nathan Brooks looked down at his hands, knuckles white. 5 years, Caleb continued. "Dragged behind horses, left in pieces. You all watched, or looked away. Either way, it stops here." Silence stretched. Outside, a horse stamped in the street. A distant hammer rang against anvil. Nathan Brooks spoke first, voice thin. "I was there. From my store window. I saw them tie the ropes. Heard the horses start. Eli didn't scream, not once. He just looked at the sky like he was already gone." Caleb's jaw tightened. The scar on his temple pulled. He remembered that look too. From the ridge above the canyon, too far to help, close enough to never forget. Hawthorne found his voice. "This is highly irregular. You have no jurisdiction." Caleb cut him off with a raised hand. "I have every right the federal badge gives me. The question is, do you have the right to keep covering up murder?" He turned to the door. Jeb "Stub" Malone stood just inside, hat in hand, badge already pinned to his vest from the night before, small, tarnished, but straight. "Stub Malone is my deputy now," Caleb said. "Any interference with his duties is interference with federal authority. Times are changing in Blackstone. You can help make them right, or you can stand with Kane when he falls." The council exchanged glances. No one spoke. Caleb picked up the badge, pinned it to his own chest. The metal felt cold against his shirt, heavy with memory. "Meeting's over," he said quietly. "Go home. Think on what you owe a dead man." They filed out slowly, shoulders hunched. Nathan Brooks lingered last, eyes on Caleb. "I never told anyone what I saw," he whispered. "Thought if I stayed quiet." Caleb looked at him, not unkind, but not soft. "Quiet's a choice too." Brooks swallowed, nodded once, and left. Outside, the sun climbed higher. Caleb stepped onto the porch, felt the eyes on him. Miners pausing in doorways, women at windows, children suddenly hushed. Word was already moving. Across the street, Stub Malone waited, shotgun cradled in the crook of his arm. He looked smaller in the daylight, but steadier. "You sure about this?" Stub asked. "They'll come for us now, hard." Caleb adjusted his hat. They were always coming. He glanced toward the Golden Spur. Clara Rollins stood on the porch, arms folded, watching. Their eyes met for a second. She didn't smile, didn't wave. Just looked, like she knew exactly what he'd just done and what it would cost. Up on the hill, in the big house, Thaddeus Kane stood at the tall window, brass telescope to his eye. He watched the council members scatter like startled birds, watched Caleb step down from the hall, badge catching sunlight. The telescope lowered slowly. Kane's hand trembled, just once, then steadied. He turned to the butler, hovering in the doorway. "Send word to the Caldwells," he said. Voice calm, but edged with something colder. "Tell them the ghost has a name, and tell them to bring every man who can hold a gun." He set the telescope down. A crystal whiskey decanter sat on the sideboard. Kane picked it up, poured a measure, then, with sudden, vicious force, hurled the glass against the wall. Shards exploded across the rug. Amber liquid ran dark down the wallpaper. The butler didn't flinch. He'd seen worse. Kane stared at the stain. "Nathan Brooks," he murmured. He looked guilty. The room fell quiet again. Down in town, Caleb walked back toward the spur, boots kicking up small puffs of dust. He felt the shift, the way the air had thickened, the way every glance now carried weight. His name was out, his badge was out, and so was the past. He paused at the edge of the boardwalk. Stub fell in beside him. "Clara's got coffee waiting," Stub said. "With honey, like you used to take it." Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked toward the distant ridge where the canyon lay hidden, where Eli had died, where he himself had almost died. Then he nodded once. They walked on together, two shadows lengthening in the morning light. Somewhere behind them, Nathan Brooks hurried toward his store, head down, shoulders tight, like a man who knew he'd just been marked. And on the hill, the broken glass glittered in the sun, sharp and waiting. The morning air in Blackstone carried the sharp bite of pine smoke from cook fires, mingling with the dust kicked up by early wagons rumbling down Main Street. The town square, little more than a dusty patch ringed by the hall, the bank, and a few weathered storefronts, buzzed with an uneasy energy. Folks gathered in loose clusters, miners in faded overalls, merchants wiping hands on aprons, women with shawls drawn tight against the chill. They watched as Caleb Harlan stood in the center, a line of volunteers, 20 or so, awkward and determined, facing him like reluctant soldiers. Caleb's voice carried low but clear. "Steady your grip. Breathe out slow. Squeeze, don't jerk." He moved among them, adjusting stances, his black duster brushing against rifles that smelled of fresh oil. Stub Malone hustled nearby, small frame darting between the men, handing out cartridges and correcting aim with a quiet grunt. "Like this, Tom," elbow in, eyes on the bottle. Caleb paused beside a young clerk whose hands shook on the Winchester. The man's face was pale, sweat beading despite the cool dawn. Caleb laid a hand on his shoulder, light, not pressing. "It's all right to be scared. Means you're paying attention." The clerk nodded, swallowed hard. Caleb remembered his own hands shaking once, 5 years back. when Eli Whitaker had handed him his first deputy badge. "Fear's a tool," Eli had said. "Just don't let it own you." Now, standing here, Caleb felt that old fear creeping back. Not the sharp panic of a fight, but the slow grind of knowing he'd dragged these people into something they might not survive. A crack echoed. Someone fired too soon. The bottle on the fence post shattered. Murmurs rose from the onlookers. Stubb glanced at Caleb. "They're green, but they're here." Caleb nodded. "That's all we need for now." He straightened, about to call for the next drill, when hoofbeats thundered from the edge of the square. Two riders, hard men in dusters, holsters slung low, pulled up sharp near the general store. One dismounted, strode to the door where the owner, an older man with a limp, froze mid-sweep. "Time to pay up," the rider growled. "Kane's orders, double this week, for the trouble." The store owner backed a step. I heard the new marshal said no more fees." The rider laughed, short and ugly. "New marshal? That drifter? He ain't law. He's dead walking." Caleb's gut tightened. He felt eyes turn to him, the volunteers, the crowd. Stubb shifted closer, hand near his revolver. Two volunteers, miners with fresh badges pinned crooked, stepped forward without waiting. "That's enough," one said. Voice steady but his knuckles white on the rifle. "Fees are done. Marshal's word." The rider turned slow. His partner stayed mounted, hand hovering. "You boys with the ghost now?" "Brave. Stupid." Tension coiled. The square went quiet, save for a horse's soft whinny and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Caleb moved then, slow, deliberate, placing himself between the riders and the store. "Walk away," he said quietly, "while you can." The rider spat. "Or what? You gonna play hero?" Before Caleb could answer, a shot cracked from the rooftop across the street. High, warning, splintering wood above the rider's head. The man flinched, drew fast. Caleb dove left, rolling in the dust as another bullet whined past, close enough to tug at his sleeve. Chaos erupted. Volunteers scattered, some firing wild. The mounted rider wheeled his horse, bolting down the street. The dismounted one backed toward the alley, gun up. Caleb came up on one knee, Colt steady. "Drop it." The man hesitated, eyes flicking to the rooftop where the warning shot had come from, then tossed his revolver in the dirt. "This ain't over. Kane'll bury you." Stubb hauled him up by the collar. "Tell Kane he's welcome to try." The square settled slow. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Caleb stood, brushing grit from his hands, heart pounding steady but hard. The scar on his temple throbbed. That shot from the roof. Kane's man, no doubt. A test. Or a message. He looked around. The volunteers regrouped, faces ashen but eyes sharper now. The store owner nodded thanks, but his limp seemed heavier as he retreated inside. Clara Rollins appeared at the edge of the crowd, basket of bandages in hand. She met Caleb's gaze, worry etching lines around her eyes. "You're pushing them. They'll push back harder." Caleb holstered the Colt. No choice left. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Then, from the town hall steps, Judge Harlan Whitaker emerged. Tall, gaunt, black robes flapping like crow wings. He carried a sheaf of papers, face set in a grim line. "Marshal Harlan?" he called, voice carrying across the square. "Or should I say Chase? I come on behalf of Mr. Kane and the territorial court." Caleb turned slow. Stubb tensed beside him. The judge held up a document. "Your actions are unlawful. Interfering with private business. Inciting disorder. This badge of yours? It's void here. Kane's got papers from the Capitol. Signed. Sealed. Whispers spread. Nathan Brooks, watching from his store doorway, went still. Caleb felt the weight settle, the old fear turning to something colder, inevitable. He could back down, ride out, let the town slide back into Kane's grip, Eli's memory fading like dust on a grave. Or stand and pull everyone with him into the blood that would follow. He stepped closer to the judge. Kane's papers don't change facts. Protection's extortion. Claims jumped. A sheriff murdered. Blackstone's soul is rotting under him. The judge's eyes narrowed. Soul? This is business. Law. You're the one breaking it. Caleb didn't flinch. Then arrest me. Whitaker hesitated, papers crinkling in his grip. The square held its breath. Finally, the judge folded the documents. This ain't a request, it's an order. He turned, mounted his horse, and rode toward the hill. Slow, like a man delivering bad news he didn't want to own. Caleb watched him go. The volunteers gathered closer. Stubb clapped a hand on his shoulder. What now? Caleb's voice was quiet. We train harder. Kane's shown his hand. He'll come for the heart of it next. The sun climbed, shadows shortening. Folks dispersed slow, whispers trailing like smoke. Caleb felt the shift. The town wasn't just watching anymore. They were in it. Up on the hill, Thaddeus Kane received the judge's report in his study, the air thick with cigar haze. He listened, face impassive. Then he nodded once. Send the rest of the men. Hit the sheriff's office before dawn. End this. The judge swallowed. And the town. Kane's cane tapped the floor. If they stand with him, they fall with him. Down in the square, Caleb picked up a spent cartridge from the dust, turned it in his fingers. The metal was still warm. He pocketed it. A reminder. The day stretched on, but the air felt heavier now, like a storm gathering just over the ridge, waiting to break. The pre-dawn chill clung to Blackstone like a shroud, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and distant creosote bushes. Shadows stretched long under the faint moon, turning the town's edges into blurred lines where anything could hide. Caleb Harlan stood on the roof of the sheriff's office, rifle resting against the parapet, eyes scanning the dark approaches. Below, the square lay empty, but he knew it wouldn't stay that way. The trap was set. Volunteers positioned in the mining office windows, behind the bank's stone facade, along the alley mouths leading into town. Stubb Malone had taken the hotel roof across the street, his small silhouette barely visible against the paling sky. Caleb's breath fogged in the cold. His shoulder ached from the earlier graze, a dull throb that reminded him how close things had come already. He thought of Eli Whitaker's last words before that canyon ambush. Sometimes holding ground means losing pieces of yourself. Caleb had lost enough back then. The scar, the years wandering. But now it wasn't just him. Clara's worried eyes from the square haunted him. Stubbs' steady nod. The volunteers, ordinary folks with families and claims, who'd signed on because he'd asked. A low whistle cut the quiet. Stubbs' signal. Riders incoming. They came from the North Road. 24 strong, shadows resolving into men on horseback. Coats flapping, rifles glinting. Hired guns, faces hard from too many border towns and bad deals. They fanned out around the sheriff's office, boots hitting dirt with muffled thuds. The lead man, a scar-faced brute with a shotgun, called up. Marshal, you and your dwarven deputy got one chance. Come out quiet or we burn this place down. Caleb didn't answer. He waited, heart steady but heavy. The fear was there, not the wild kind, but the slow dread of knowing blood would spill, and some of it innocent. Gunfire erupted, sporadic at first, testing. Bullets chipped wood from the office walls, whining off stone. Inside, 2 volunteers hunkered behind barricades of sandbags and overturned desks. One, a miner named Jed, peered out a shuttered window. "They're circling," he muttered. From the hotel roof, Stubbs' voice carried soft on the wind. "Hold. Wait for the signal." Caleb raised his arm, then dropped it. The trap sprang. Rifles cracked from the mining office, sharp and disciplined. 2 hired guns jerked in their saddles, horses rearing. From the bank, more fire poured down, pinning the attackers in the open square. Shouts rose, curses, commands barked in panic. The smell of black powder bloomed, acrid and choking, mixing with the copper tang of blood. One hired gun broke for the alley, firing wild. A volunteer from the rooftops, a young clerk who'd shaken during drills, squeezed off a shot. The man went down, clutching his leg, boots scraping dirt. But Kane's men pushed back. A torch arced through the air, shattering against a storefront. Flames licked up the dry wood of the general store, crackling, hungry. The owner burst out, yelling, beating at the fire with a blanket. 2 volunteers rushed to help, exposed. A bullet caught the first in the shoulder, spinning him back. He hit the ground hard, blood blooming dark on his shirt. The second dove for cover, but a splintered plank from the burning wall exploded outward, shards raking his arm and face. He screamed once, short and raw, then went quiet, curling in the dirt. Caleb's gut twisted. He fired twice, methodical, not frantic, dropping one attacker from his horse. But the cost burned in his mind. Those men weren't soldiers. They were fathers, brothers, staking their lives on his word. "Push 'em back," Stubb yelled from the hotel, his shotgun booming. Leads scattered, forcing 3 gunslingers to scramble behind a water trough. Up on the hill, Thaddeus Kane stood at his mansion window, brass telescope steady in his grip. The flashes below looked like distant lightning, the pops of gunfire rolling up faint and delayed. Judge Whitaker hovered behind him, collar askew. "They're holding," the judge murmured. "Your men are faltering." Kane's jaw tightened. "Then burn the records. Erase Harrison's, Whitaker's files. No evidence, no case." He lowered the scope. "And send for Slade. Iron Vance Slade. Tell him the price is whatever he asks." The judge nodded, slipping out. Down in town, the fight dragged on. Caleb slid down the ladder into the office, where the wounded volunteer, shoulders shattered, lay against the wall, face ashen. Clara Rollins knelt beside him, pressing a rag to the wound, her hands steady but eyes wet. "He'll live," she said, voice tight. "But that arm, he'll never swing a pick again." Caleb knelt too, helped tie the bandage. The man's breathing came ragged, pain etching lines deep. "Should have stayed home," he gasped. Caleb met his eyes. "You saved the store, saved lives." But the words felt hollow. This was the choice. Hold for the many, lose the few. Or break and let Kane grind the whole town under his boot. No clean path. A shout from outside. Nathan Brooks, leading a ragged group of miners from the outlying claims, charging in on horseback. Picks and shovels glinted, but their rifles spoke louder. "For Blackstone," Brooks yelled, voice cracking with fury. They hit the attacker's flank, turning the tide. Hired guns wavered, then broke, retreating in a scatter of hoofbeats and curses. 3 bodies lay still in the square, blood soaking into the dust. Caleb stood, watching them go. The fire at the store smoldered now, half extinguished. But the wall was charred black, a scar that wouldn't heal easy. Stubb dropped down from the hotel, face smeared with powder. We held. But look at this. He nodded to the wounded. Caleb wiped sweat from his brow. The dawn light crept higher, turning the blood red to rust. In the distance, smoke rose from another spot. The records office, where Caldwell brothers had tried a sneaky burn. But the real files, Eli's hidden cache, were safe in the office basement. Caleb had moved them last night. Still the price. 2 men down, lives altered. Clara stood, wiping her hands on her apron. They'll come again, harder. Caleb nodded. I know. He looked toward the hill where the mansion lights still burned. Kane wouldn't stop. Not now. And somewhere on the southern road, a lone rider, Iron Vance Slade, would soon turn his horse toward Blackstone, drawn by gold and the promise of a kill. The square fell quiet, save for the moans of the wounded and the crackle of dying flames. Caleb holstered his Colt, the weight heavier than before. The church in Blackstone stood at the quiet end of town, its white clapboard walls silvered by moonlight, steeple cutting a sharp silhouette against the star-scattered sky. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood polish, candle wax, and the faint, lingering dust of too many funerals. Lanterns hung from iron hooks, throwing warm pools of light across the pews where the townspeople sat. Miners with blackened hands, folded, women clutching shawls, children wide-eyed and silent. No one spoke much. The day's gunfire still echoed in their ears. The smoke from the half-burned store still clung to clothes. Caleb Harlan stood at the front, near the simple pulpit. No coat tonight, just a plain shirt, sleeves rolled, the marshal's badge pinned crooked over his heart. Stubb Malone sat in the front row, legs dangling above the floorboards, shotgun resting across his knees like a prayer book. Caleb looked out at them, faces he'd come to know in days that felt like years. Clara Rollins near the back, hands clasped tight. Nathan Brooks beside her, head bowed. The 2 wounded volunteers from the morning sat propped against the wall, bandages fresh but stained. He cleared his throat. I didn't call you here to preach, or to promise victory. I called you because tomorrow Kane will try to end this, and we need to remember why we're standing. He stepped down from the platform, walked past the pews, out the side door into the small cemetery behind the church. The graves were simple, wooden crosses, a few stones. One plot stood apart, freshly tended, wildflowers placed at the base. Eli Whitaker's grave. Caleb knelt, Stubb followed, small boots scuffing the dirt. Moonlight caught the etched name, Eli Whitaker, defender of justice. Caleb traced the letters with a finger. Justice is patient, he said quietly. Justice remembers. Stubb nodded. He'd be proud, even if it hurts like hell. Caleb's voice dropped lower. I let him down once. Stood too far back. Watched them drag him. Heard the rope snap. I crawled away bleeding, thinking I'd die too. But I didn't. And every day since, I've carried that scar. Not just on my head, but here. He touched his chest. Tomorrow. If we lose, his name gets buried again. Forgotten. Like it never mattered. Stubb looked up at him. Then we don't lose. Inside the church, Clara stood. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. I saw Eli every Sunday. He'd bring firewood when the winter bit hard, helped fix the porch when the roof leaked, never asked for a thing. When they took him, I stood at my window and did nothing. Just watched. The horses kicking up dust, the ropes tightening, the laughter fading down the canyon. I still wake up hearing it, and I'm ashamed. Nathan Brooks rose next, hands shaking. I was in my store, Saw the whole thing from the window. Didn't run out. Didn't shout. Thought if I stayed quiet, it wouldn't touch me. But it did. It touches all of us now. Murmurs rippled through the pews. Some nods, some tears held back. A miner in the back spoke up. Kane's men say the marshal's just here for revenge, personal grudge, that the badge is a lie. Caleb had stepped back inside. He met the man's eyes. They're half right. It started personal. I came back to settle a score. But it's bigger now. Eli didn't die for my grudge. He died trying to keep this town honest. If we let Kane win, we let that die too. He pulled up his sleeve, showed the faint scar on his temple, thin, white, ugly in the lantern light. This is what they left me. A bullet that should have ended it. I lived. Eli didn't. Tomorrow, when the shooting starts again, some of you might not walk away. I might not. But if we run, his memory runs with us. And Blackstone becomes just another town Kane owns. Silence fell, heavy as lead. Outside, hoofbeats approached. Slow, deliberate, echoing down the empty street. A lone rider reined in at the church steps. Black stallion, black coat dusted with trail grit. The man dismounted, spurs chiming soft. Tall, lean, eyes cold under a low hat. A custom revolver rode low on his hip, grip wrapped in rattlesnake skin. Iron, Vance Slade. He called up to the open doors, voice carrying clear and calm. Marshal Harlan, or Chase, whatever name you're using tonight. Let's make this simple. You and me. Main Street. Dawn. Winner takes Blackstone. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Inside, people shifted. Some gasped. Others gripped the pews tighter. Caleb stepped to the doorway. Moonlight caught his face, highlighting the scar. He looked down at Slade, steady, but the weight in his chest pressed harder. I didn't come back for a duel, Caleb said. I came back for justice. Slade's mouth curved just a fraction. Justice don't draw fast. Men do. He swung back into the saddle, turned the horse slow. Dawn, don't be late. The hoofbeats faded into the night. Caleb stood there a long moment, wind tugging at his shirt. Behind him, the congregation watched. Some afraid, some resolute, all changed. Up on the hill, Thaddeus Kane lowered his telescope from the mansion window. A thin, satisfied smile touched his lips. The fire in the grate cast long shadows across his face. Finally, he murmured to the empty room, the ghost meets his match. He set the scope down. The cane tapped once against the floor, slow, deliberate. In the churchyard, Caleb returned to Eli's grave. He knelt again, hand resting on the cool earth. The wind whispered through the grass. Somewhere in the dark, a single shot cracked. Distant, testing. Not aimed at anyone. Just a reminder. Dawn was coming, and with it, no clean victory. Only the hard truth that some things, some men, some memories, had to be fought for, even when the cost was already too high. Dawn broke cold over Blackstone. The sky a thin, pale gray, streaked with blood red at the horizon. Main Street lay empty except for the wind stirring dust devils along the ruts. The town held its breath. Windows shuttered, doors barred, rooftops lined with shadows that were men and women clutching rifles. The smell of last night's gunpowder still hung low, mixing with the sharp bite of sage and the faint iron tang of drying blood from yesterday's fight. A single rider appeared at the far end of the street, black stallion stepping slow and deliberate. Iron Vance Slade sat tall in the saddle, long coat dusted with trail grit, rattlesnake skin grip on his custom revolver catching the first light. He reined in at the center of the street, dismounted with easy grace, and tied the horse to a post outside the Golden Spur. Then he straightened, eyes scanning the silent buildings. "Marshal Harlan," he called, voice carrying clear and calm across the empty stretch. "Or Chase, whatever name you're carrying today. Let's make this simple. You and me. Here and now. Winner takes Blackstone." The words rolled out like thunder waiting to break. From the doorway of the sheriff's office, Caleb stepped forward. No coat, just shirt and vest. The old U.S. Marshal badge pinned beside Eli Whitaker's tarnished one. His Colt hung low, but his hands stayed loose at his sides. He walked to the edge of the boardwalk, boots scraping wood. "This town ain't a prize to be won in a duel," Caleb said. "And I didn't come back for a gunfight. I came back for justice." Vance's mouth curved, just a flicker. "Justice don't draw first. Men do." He let his hand drift toward the holster. The street stayed quiet a heartbeat longer. Then movement. Subtle, everywhere. Windows cracked open. Rifles appeared on rooftops. Nathan Brooks stepped out from the bank doorway, Eli's old badge held high in his fist. Miners from the outlying claims flanked him, faces set. Clara Rollins stood at the saloon porch, hands clenched on the rail. Stub Malone emerged from an alley, shotgun steady. Vance turned slow, taking it in. For the first time, something flickered behind his cold eyes. Uncertainty, maybe the first real one in years. "You're hiding behind the town now?" he said, voice mocking but thinner. Caleb shook his head. "They're not hiding. They're standing." Vance drew, fast, a blur of motion. The revolver cleared leather, hammer clicking back. Caleb moved, not toward the draw, but sideways, using the porch post for cover. A shot cracked from the rooftop. Stubbs' people not aiming to kill, just to force Vance's attention. The gunslinger spun, firing once into the air above the hotel. Splinters rained. In that split second, Caleb closed the distance. Quiet, steady, slipping behind Vance like a shadow. He pressed the muzzle of his Colt to the back of the man's skull. "Eli was faster than you," Caleb said, low enough for only Vance to hear. "They shot him in the back because they couldn't face him honorably." Vance froze. His revolver stayed up, but the hand trembled just once.